Welcome to another video tutorial. Today I'm going to cover something about composition, because some people really have trouble with that, and some people have really have trouble, like, even when you're going out and drawing something for real. Sometimes I still struggle with it a little bit, but I have some rules that you can use, or guidelines, or whatever you want to call them. They're not hard and fast, but they really do help when you want to compose a scene. It's very simple, actually, and if you do photography, you should already know this. Otherwise, you're just kind of like a mediocre photographer, in my opinion. But anyway, that's just some hardcore opinions going out there. So if you imagine that you are drawing in a box like this, there's a thing in photography and composition called rule of thirds, and I highly recommend you follow that. Rule of thirds really just does help with composition a lot, and when I decide when I'm gonna draw something, knowing to constrain things within a third actually does make it a lot easier. So what is the rule of thirds? So if you have a box or a rectangle or whatever, you divide it into three, and that's where most of your elements should be. So if you are drawing, let's say, a landscape, you want the horizon line to either be on the first top of the third or the bottom part of the third. And they have different applications for each. I can't quite... I'll just put my own opinion forward, because there's a lot of guides out there that can explain it a lot better than me. Typically, with a higher third, you want to be seeing everything in this area, or you want to announce scale. So if something's off in the distance like this, then you want to emphasize whatever's here. If you're doing this bottom third, you want to have the subject matter be the focus of the thing, because the rest of it really doesn't matter. So this one is good for, like, if you're drawing mountains, stuff like that, and this one is good if you're drawing like a signpost or whatever. So just knowing that alone can help immensely when you are trying to figure out, how do I draw this scene? How did this person, if you're trying to understand other people's artwork, it really does help to understand, like, oh, they put things on a third. Now, this isn't a hard and fast rule. I've seen a lot of compositions lately on Pinterest where it's kind of like this vertical format, which is quite strange, but it works better for a computer or visual format or whatever. They'll typically put sometimes like the horizon line down on the last fifth. So being able to count roughly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on any kind of shape is really helpful, because I've seen things on the bottom fifth which creates a bigger scale than this bottom here. And what that does is it really means you can emphasize something large and big, like a lighthouse that I've seen recently or anything like that, and then you have the rest of the stuff, like context, down here. It's fun to play around with, but it's also just really helpful to know roughly where something is. So is it a fifth down? Is it a fourth down? Is it a third down? Is it a second down? Is it a first down? And I've come to be able to divide things like this really easily, because I've just done a lot of practice, but I also have some experience in understanding relative distances. I'm not always correct, and it's not always perfect, but it doesn't have to be, if you know what I mean. The rule of third is a rule of thumb, but sometimes you can just go above, like you can do less than a third and it's still okay, and you can do more than a third and it's still okay. The one thing you really want to avoid is center lining everything. That is like amateur mistake number one. It's like using clip art when you're trying to make a header in your Word documents. It is something you did as a child. It is not something you should do as an adult, ever. There are exceptions to this rule, of course. If you're doing reflections or a neat silhouette, or if you really want to be dramatic, you do the middle divide. Or you're doing patterns or anything like that, that's when you use the middle rule. But very rarely, if you're doing something interesting like a composition or a drawing or a scene or a landscape, even portraiture kind of works in a rule of third. I'm just going to tangent here because tangents are fun, but if you imagine a face, we like to think it's a circle, but in fact it is actually a rule of third, because we'll divide the circle into the middle, but we'll have the top of the hairline and the nose. So this is top of the hairline, this is the nose, and if we take that distance and bring it down, that's our chin. Now we have 1, 2, 3 areas, and you start building a face out of that. This is the brow line, this is the eye line. So this is going to turn into a quick face tutorial. And from here, if you find the center line, which makes it easier, and then this is where the bridge of the nose is, and then you have circles for eyes, and then the nose comes to here, or the nostrils come to about here, I found. Yeah. And then the mouth is somewhere about here. So you draw a nice smile, lips come down to here, you draw the eyes, the only important part of drawing a face, really, in my opinion, that and the hair. And then you have a face. You're starting to get a face here. But as you can see, it's divided into 3. It's 1 space, 2 space, 3 spaces. It's not... the eyes aren't in the center of the face, the eyebrows aren't in the center of the face. It all is conducive to whatever you're doing. So 3 is also a weird natural number that you should probably learn about. And I am going to just essentially break it down to the rule of thirds as a starting point, because I don't want to overcomplicate it with other things like perspective and scale and all that sort of stuff. If anything you can take away from understanding composition right now is to divide the scene into 3s, and put yourself on that guideline. So I'm going to do one more little thing here. So I'll draw a rectangle, and we'll do the rule of thirds. So this is 1/3, this is 1/3, this is 1/3, this is 1/3. Let's say that the composition, there's stuff on the horizon line here. So I didn't talk about these vertical lines, and that's how I'm going to end it here. These ones can dictate where the focal points of your composition are. There's another rule where you kind of lead the eye, but I'm not going to worry about that just yet because it's not that important. So if you were drawing like a road, so we'll do it real quick because this is easy. You're going to draw a mountain, and you're going to draw more mountains like this, like so. So now you have a bunch of mountains, but I purposely left this gap here for a reason. That's the starting point of our composition. So from here, if you want to draw a path, you start from this point and then you lead it down to this point. And what you can do here is, maybe if we just tighten that a little bit, don't worry about being perfect, do some thumbnails, have some fun. Then you can add another piece of thing, and instead of putting it somewhere arbitrary in the middle, which will look weird, you can put your signpost that has like a speed limit sign right here. And then it makes it vastly more interesting. I'll show you quickly what it looks like if you try and do things like towards the center. So if you do it towards the center, it can look interesting. So this is the middle, and then we did that, and that will be the middle of the composition. And then the road will come straight, and we'll put the sign somewhere arbitrary, like here. And it doesn't look half bad, actually. It doesn't look half bad. Right. So this one doesn't look half bad, but it's not that interesting. I've drawn the same shapes here, and I've drawn the same shapes here. But just by moving it over slightly, we've created something a little more interesting. We've had to curve the road. We've put the sign somewhere in a natural visual zone. Yeah? So you'll always see this first, and then you'll see yourself going off into the distance. For this one, all the information is all at once. It's like telling everyone the plot at the start. There's no interest, there's nothing exciting. You see, it's flat, it's clear, it's whatever. There's nothing interesting. You know exactly what the scene is trying to say, and maybe that's what you want with this one. But with this one, you're saying, look over here, and then we're gonna go all the way over here. And that's more dramatic. It's more of a story tell. So yeah, that's just a little bit of an introduction into composition and how I think about it. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I love interacting with you guys. I love that you guys are watching these. I love that you guys are probably enjoying these. Maybe, if not, tell me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.